Anastasia, welcome to the podcast. It's wonderful to meet you. You were born in Poland, you now live in LA, and you have a degree in psychology, and you are doing some incredible things right now to bring awareness to the cycles of childhood trauma. You're the CEO of Expose Productions and the Barbara Lee Foundation, organizations that empower survivors of abusive relationships through documentaries and visual media. And you have just produced a documentary series called Expose, which gathers the stories of 88 survivors of narcissistic relationships, along with specialists in the field of narcissism, to prove that you can thrive after an abusive relationship. And we will chat about everything you are doing with Expose a little bit later. You have personally experienced several narcissistic relationships in your life. The journey into abusive relationships generally begins in childhood, and your journey has been profound. When you were 2 years old, something very tragic happened in your life. Can you tell us what happened when you were two?
Yes, as you said, I was born in Poland in a little village of, I think, 300 people nearby Poznań. And what happened when I was 2 years old, back then, actually, my family was in Krakow, and which I don't remember, of course, because I was 2 years old. But so all what I'm sharing are just memories from my mother. My father suffered from depression for majority of his life, I would say, before even he met my mother. And he had this long story of trying to become a priest, and my mom wanted to become nun. That's how they met. Very spiritual in some way, even though it was a Catholic church, and there's many things to talk about when it comes to religions. But my father tried the spirituality to find a way out for his depressive symptoms and didn't work out. And the happiest moments for him actually were in the marriage with my mother. That's what his psychiatrist said, that he couldn't recognize him after he met my mom and had children, that she would never say that he is so severely ill, because for a while he was diagnosed with maniac depression, because he had the maniac episodes when he was like overgiving and sharing and just compulsive behaviors, I would say. Not dangerous in any way, just being impulsive. And so what happened in February 6, 1996 was he supposed to go pick up my brother from kindergarten, but he didn't feel well. And he was back then living with his mother. And he just shared with her how he doesn't want to go, how he feel really low. But she forced him and said, come on, somebody has to pick him up. Because my mother was working during that time. She had to provide for both parents, because my father couldn't really back then work because of the mental episodes. He never got to that kindergarten. He left, and my mom was actually coming from work in Krakow, and she heard the ambulance, and somebody approached her or said something, that there was a man who jumped from a building. And back then she just didn't do anything out of it. She just went home, and then hours passed. They actually call her to recognize the body. That's how it works, actually. The spouse has to recognize the remaining parts of the body. I don't know exactly how it was, but I know she had to go to the police office and do all that recognition process, if we can call. And she was just traumatized. And we never actually had longer conversation than this one about it, because she shuts down when we gets to this moment. And the body remembers, the body keeps the score. There's this great book, because in a therapy, I had those moments of like remembering that I try to reach my hands and feeling in my body that he's leaving, and like feeling that he's not going to maybe come back. So when I work in the therapy, especially in IFS, and I did the AMDR as well, but I had those memories which I was able to recognize the reason why I was afraid that people will leave me, because it was going back to that moment when he's leaving. I'm screaming, he doesn't come back. He never came back. Actually, he never. So I stopped actually talking for 12 months. And back then my mom, it was 1996. The child's psychology wasn't very developed. So nobody really knew that it was a result of trauma, me not talking. So I never really got to see any psychologists or got any help. And I just naturally started talking after those 12 months. I guess that's what it was. But yeah, that's what happened when I was 2.
Yeah, and it's extreme, isn't it? To not speak for 12 months. That's really, it just shows the trauma that you felt in your body. And I guess we think a child that's 2, they're just 2, they're not really understanding what's happening. But obviously, it had a profound impact on you. And so you lost your father and you grew up really missing him in your life. What did you start to believe about yourself because of your father's death?
There's few things which I started believing about myself after my dad's death, but we need to bring the point that I didn't know that my dad actually died committing suicide. I discovered it when I was 12 years old, and I found a newspaper trying to just discover what really happened, because I knew what my mom was telling me, that it was some accident, health issue. We all are curious. So when my mom would leave, I would just go through all the papers and do my research. But so I discovered it later, which I like to bring up because so many times parents think they protect the children by not sharing what really happened. Children are very intuitive, and it's hard to lie to a child because they're not conditioned yet to many things. So they pick up stuff right away, their senses. Even when I knew it was an accident before the discovery, I still had this wound of not being wanted. And also, it wasn't just my father death, it was also my stepfather being somewhere alcoholic, and my brother, he actually suffers from bipolar disorder with maniac episodes and just a lot of chaos. And all of that created abuse being normal, the emotional abuse, and so the physical abuse. I didn't experience sexual abuse from my brother or my father, but I had some situation with my cousin later on when there was like sexual abuse, I would say. But not of that was really named or talked about. It was like my father death. It was like hidden. We don't talk about it. So there was this fear of abandonment, that if I don't please you, then you'll leave. And then if I also doing too much, making sure you're okay, and even being aggressive, like currently my partner is healing from the stage 4 cancer, and I had to stop myself from doing too much because it was like aggressive, even from my side, of just too much trying to help save him. And I knew I was going from a place of saving my father, and even being drawn to partners who are, because when I met him I knew had health issues. So that also is related somewhere to, we're hypothesizing, it might be related to that need to get a closure. I need to get the closure from saving my father. And also, all of my partners are at least 20 years older in the past. And I actually feel more drawn to men older, which I almost feel like now it's time to change. But yeah, but getting that attention first, right? When I met that life coach when I was living in Barcelona, where I moved from home, left my country to start to make a new world for myself, and me actually not seeing those red flags with him and staying for all cost, regardless, experiencing pain. So that's another thing, that even when I wanted to leave, I still didn't, because there was a part of me who was comfortable with the abuse because that was the normal. And my back then my pain didn't matter for me, and that was huge to realize that your pain matters, that we weren't born here on this earth to suffer, and we actually can experience the opposite of all of that. That's relieving. And I guess that need to control things, which manifested somewhere in food disorders when I suffered from bulimia when I was 16, and anxiety too. So all of it's not just one event, it's the accumulation of like this mountain, and it's not a big deal, not a big deal, but it grows, and then you feel one day horrible and you don't know what happened. But it was just this mountain of not knowing how to deal with feelings. And I think the most important thing it had on me also was me not being able to know what I feel. Like actually being so much focused externally and chasing people around, regardless romantically or friendships or jobs, horrible jobs. Oh my God, horrible jobs. It manifested there too. And sweeping the tables when I was living in Spain. And then when I was with that life coach who liked that I had this kind of job because of it was keeping me small, right? You know, when you are around unhealthy people by the way they make you feel when you're around them. And I had to learn boundaries, and I'm still learning. And actually,
You lost your father at a very young age. Then you're surrounded by the grief of the people around you. You're surrounded by chaos and your mother and a new partner and your brother. And there's so much going on. And also, nobody's really telling you what's happened. The fact that you had to look for the answers of your father's death, and there's so much secrecy there. And I don't think parents, they are trying to protect us, but they don't realize that by keeping secrets, it's not healthy. We just want to know the truth. But I guess that comes from generations of trauma. And I know that some of your dad's family were at Auschwitz Nazi concentration camp back in 1944 in Poland. Can you tell us a little bit about that part of your family's history?
I wish I knew more. So what I can say is that I'm betraying my whole family by just speaking with you about all of what's unspeakable in a good way, because I want to have kids in the future, which I'm not a mother yet, and I'm doing it for me first, but also I know that's going to result in them being able to speak and be free. So what I know from the mother of my dad is that from that part of the family, they were some members in the Auschwitz, in the Holocaust campus. And actually, when I was 8 years old, I went to Auschwitz because that was my mom's dream to see the Auschwitz campus, but she didn't realize I was too young. But I do remember seeing walls because there's a place where there are all the names of people who have died. And there was that surname, Gajkowski, which is mine. So I think that was one of my relatives. I always ask for pictures and it's hidden again. My grandmother died, so it has to be me to find more exactly all the details. The one thing it's necessary to say is that those members who were in the Auschwitz were Jewish, and it wasn't safe to even after the war to let people know you have some Jewish ancestors. What I'm trying to say is that people don't want to talk about it on purpose. And when there's resistance, there is layers of things. And it's like opening the Pandora box. Yeah, I don't even have pictures of my own father. I asked that part of the family, and there is things are lost, they can be found. So I guess it would be me, one of my future trips to Poland to actually do more research, but to know more about that.
So you're saying
And
that your family, that part of the family
oh yeah,
still feels shame for being at Auschwitz?
or just not being able to talk about it. Like, why would we talk about it? I think it's
Mm.
shame, but it might be just not realizing that information might be important for me, for example, and just to realize my heritage. Yeah, just not hearing my voice when it comes to expressing my needs, which is common in toxic families when it's this is what we can talk, but we are not going to talk about this and this. This is
Mm.
the amount of knowledge you can know. They think they protect you, but I feel that fortunately, living in transparency brings so much more comfort and peace. And but I had to accept that's their decision, and I respect that too.
Yeah. And that sort of trauma, it does come down the family line. It gets passed on, and that would have been a part of your dad's trauma
Mhm.
too. And obviously now yourself. And as an outsider, I would look and think those people were heroes. Like they were incredible people to have gone through that instead of it's something that we should be ashamed or we don't speak about. It's interesting, isn't it? That shame of being who they see themselves or how they feel others have seen them is so
Yeah.
entrenched.
I think they still think they're in the war. Some of them, when you didn't heal, you're reliving from parts of you which are unhealed. So those are the past wounds. So it's unconscious. That's my perspective on it. So my grandpa, he would keep things from the moment he was born, I think. People change when they're willing to change. And I realized I had to let them be the way they are. And that's why somewhere I'm happy in a way that I'm living so far away, because that shame, I feel almost it's easier for me to live the life I want with the work I'm doing without that shame around me. I think if I was living in Poland, there would be so much more pressure on me to keep quiet and keep in line, because that's what it has been for centuries. And all of that was to protect, yeah, and to survive. And it was created from the place of love by them, thinking that this is the way to survive. The times change, and I'm living in this beautiful place nearby the beach, and I don't have to live from the place of being afraid the war is going to come. But I thank them for everything. Because of them, I'm here. But I had to release stuff, give back to them all what is not mine. And I think that's a great thing to do when you're doing the energy healing. It's to look back to the lines on your mother and your father and see that whatever comes up and thank them, and just say, I would like to invite you, if you're listening, to do that with us if you want. And you can keep your eyes open and just thank them for all what they taught you, recognizing that was from the place of trying to protect you, and just mentioning that I release to you what's yours and I keep what's mine to create what's next. And in a way to cut the cords. I think that it is necessary to recognize that that was always coming from a place of protection. But now, as we have evolved as humans, instead of pointing fingers, it's okay, let's evolve, let's take it wherever we want to take it. And it's unknown, because are we going to move toward compassion and seeing each other, or yeah, where that journey will bring us? Like, it's exciting.
Yeah, it is. And that's beautiful advice. And so you're carrying a lot of grief and trauma as a child. And as you became a teen, how did that pain and rejection turn into self-destruction?
It's funny to reflect on that. I think I will need some walk after this. But yeah, that's a great question. How that grief you mentioned, right? And
Mm,
pain manifested in my adolescence. I think the food disorders and just being trying to be perfect for all costs and exercising very intensively, which part of it was releasing all that anger I couldn't express and had to keep quiet. So I see that therapeutically, yes, but also the body is not designed for this amount of exercises. So that's first. But then I would be very afraid to talk with people. Yeah. I am introvert. And back then I had all those masks trying to be part of the conditioning process so I can belong. But I do remember that feeling like I was the outsider somewhere. I was awkward. I was the one who had those ideas nobody had. And like, I'm also a painter. So I love painting, which is another way of therapy, which naturally comes to us when we're children, right? We write, we paint, we make all this beautiful stuff, which naturally it's a great way to transmute that energy. So under all those masks, when I go home, I will just cry. I will spend many moments crying and feeling depressed, and then feeling afraid actually to talk with my mom, because there was this fear, what if I share and there will be like this going to psychiatric or getting meds, which I knew my body didn't want any pills. That's what I knew, that it wasn't about taking some Prozac, but I didn't know what it was. So that will be the second, just living very the opposite life which I have now, which is like trying to suppress and close it and be like in my room crying many times to release all of that what I couldn't express, not being able to confront people, but also being perfect. I would try to be the A student, and with my ADHD, you can think how it is, trying to catch up and spending like being very ambitious on the side to please my mother to get the degree she never got. She always wanted to be psychologist, but it didn't work out. So I feel like that need of being the rescuer was, yes, it was because of my family conditioning, but also, yeah, as a people pleaser trying to get the degree, which everyone does, which as an artist, I always felt like, no, I'm just going to do theater. And that was another, my favorite thing to do. I would spend hours actually in theater, on stage, and I will get all the attention I needed in unhealthy ways. I don't know. Who knows? But it worked. But it got to the point when I was maybe 18, and it all felt empty. I felt that even acting, it was after one of those performances and people are giving you compliments. But I felt, is this what it is? This was what I was chasing. Do I want to do it for the next 20 years? No. What else is there? I thought this will feel better. And also another thing, I would be afraid of intimacy, and instead of creating intimacy and feeling my feelings, I would rather spend time being very productive, just not being able to rest and just enjoying. And the last thing I would say, I never had a boyfriend actually, because I grew up in this Catholic family and I supposed to marry and be a virgin and all of that beautiful things. So I actually was so shy each time some boy approached me, and I would just feel that I'm ugly, or the opposite, that I'm superior, and that I just didn't like them. So it will be just low self-worth and feeling like crap, I think. I see also the connection between the somatic and psychological, because that was the time also when I had some health issues. So it's all connected. The childhood trauma was resulted in holding those emotions and then manifested in diseases.
Yes, 100%. And that's something that a lot of people are not realizing, that the trauma, it is all of those health issues, isn't it? And I think, yeah, a lot of people are trying to find so many solutions, and it's all coming from their trauma, from their mind. It sounds as if being on the stage was not filling your cup in many ways. You were thinking that was going to be your way of living, to get this adoration. And then, of course, it's just this self-abandonment underneath, isn't it? You never feel a feeling, you never look at what you need, you're just trying then constantly to please other people. Did you understand there was any connection between what had happened to you as a child and what was happening to you as you were getting older?
Not until, I would say, 2020 January. That's when I started my first therapy session.
That's pretty recent. And so the rejection that you always felt growing up led you into 4 separate narcissistic relationships as an adult. What was initially attractive to you when getting into a relationship with these men? How did they make you feel?
Opposite to how I felt. So yeah, it's funny. Funny because on the other side, they were extension of my future self. That confidence, that charm, that kind of naturality to connect with anyone, that sense of humor and being able to make you laugh. Being older, that maturity and that my belief that if they are older, then they know more, and that's how I will avoid making mistakes. That was another thing actually which came up, the idea of being afraid to make mistakes. That's what it was with the acting too. It was just this somebody being there and looking at you in such a way that you feel important. That was sexy, right? Especially back then, not anymore. Now I look for different things, but back then it was like, oh yeah, I matter. I'm important. Just being there anytime. When I moved to LA, that second partner, third partner, all of them were narcissistic before the therapy. Just being available, that intensity. Yeah, whatever you need, Dav, you need to take you there, or let's have some trip, that roller coaster of different experiences. When I just came to LA and flew from Barcelona, had no friends yet. So they were just there willing to lose all of their agenda, their work, and just be happy to spend time with me. And that was like, wow, this is exciting. I didn't question that because I didn't have any evaluations of people. Like I would take whatever it comes up. I take it, that's who they are. I wouldn't evaluate them. And the time is to look for some patterns or inconsistencies. I would just close my eye where something came out. Oh, probably they had bad day. Justification. And another thing, what attracted me, just that promise of better future with the first relationship with that life coach. He claimed that God is using him to change my life, and he would keep repeating that statement, that if I leave him, I would reject God, that he had those dreams that he saw I'm possessed by bad demons, and that if I leave him, I will go to hell. It sounds funny, but back then I had nobody to talk with. And the idea of hell and heaven was real for me. And I just couldn't see that somebody could gaslight me. I wasn't familiar with that, naming that. Of course, I've been through it, but I just didn't know it exists, like a name for it. And I was not questioning myself instead of questioning them. Like,
It's like a perfect storm, isn't it? When a narcissist meets somebody with low self-worth, because as a person with low self-worth, you can never please somebody enough. And so you just keep coming back, don't you? And they get more and more power over you. Can you look back and see some of the red flags that you missed with those relationships?
Yeah, there were red flags on my side too, because I overshared. That was the first thing. Just shared too much too quickly. Then the intensity of just knowing him knowing more about me in a few days than some of my family members. And then not respecting the no. That would be another thing. Doesn't have to be huge like sexual trauma, right? It could be like not agreeing to go to my restaurant, but that we have to go to this restaurant, like very strict rules. Wow, where is that coming from? And yeah, isolation, of course, but that comes later, the isolation. And I almost feel like what happens to all of us is the grooming, which the first stage is like the love booming. So they are so intense. They give you time, attention, gifts, whatever you need, so you can trust them. And when the abuse starts, like I was joking, like gaslighting, trying change your reality. I just had thought of one of the people I interviewed for expose. She was dressing up, going for some beautiful dinner. It was the first week they met. She's all dressed up, looking beautiful, high heel shoes. They're in Las Vegas, going for this night have party. And so she walks away from the bathroom. He's sitting on the sofa, and she's already shining to go. And he's, looking at her and like, you look like a whore. And it was from the 10.
Yeah.
So she's like, you really hurt my feelings. She actually expressed what had happened. She said, you really hurt my feelings. But and that's the moment they shifted. I was just kidding. Come on, I was completely kidding. Don't worry, it's great. So and then you feel, oh, maybe he was kidding. Okay, that's okay, whatever. Yeah, let's go for party. So you don't take it for what it was, which that's extreme red flag. And that was the first week of knowing. And that's Caroline Markle Hammond. She's a great woman. But she shared later on, what if she left that day, that moment when she felt, oh my God, and she just took those shoes and walked away? She would have another 10 years of life. We cannot attack ourselves because we really don't know what if we could leave but find somebody else with the same traits. So it's really about the healing, what prevents it from happening, and not the other way around.
When things go wrong, did you tend to blame yourself?
Yeah, that's another thing of the being gaslighted. So I will internalize it, and then I will connect it with what's familiar from my childhood, which was taking the victim role. Yeah, that's so familiar. And many times when we leave those abusive relationship, there's this line between being a survivor or thriver, which many of us never leave because of that victim role. There's a moment, it's so important to feel all what you've been through, but we don't have to stay there. That's my point. That going from the self-attack to the place of just observing all what happened in your life and realizing that you have so much more to live, even though there's this idea, oh, they took so much of my time. Back then I self-attacked, and I do remember actually 2018, December 6th, that's when I left that abusive relationship in Barcelona. And I went to report. I was forced to actually report the whole situation. I didn't want to go, I was scared, but somebody who helped me escape that relationship, because actually I was renting a room at the house of that life coach. That's how we met. So I was renting a room, paying my rent, and one day he just decided to be my life coach, and I was already there. So it was hard to say no. And I wasn't the first and the last, but my point at that place, because I discovered a few more things later when I left, but that day when I decided to leave, and I had actually a stranger I met on the event, He invited me to his and his girlfriend's house, and they just wanted to meet me, who I am, get to know me. And yeah, and surely I explain what I actually didn't tell them everything. I just told them about the emotional abuse, but I was in denial. That's another thing. And there is this syndrome called Stockholm syndrome that when you're living those relationships, there is so much fog and the cognitive dissonance and so many mechanism is like getting out of the drag, basically. That's why it feels so hard to break the trauma bond. I was self-attacking and I felt I couldn't blame him yet back then, which the idea of blaming is not to point fingers, but more to realize that, hey, this is the boundary. I let you in. I allowed that happen, but
It's not okay.
this is not okay. This is not me. So
how long were you in that relationship for?
yeah, that was over 4 years. I was 19 when I met him, and yeah, so that was my first ever, if you can quote unquote call it relationship, and that's a horrible way to actually have a relationship. And
Especially because you're only 19, and was he an older man?
oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And
20
so I
years.
guess when we're that old, we're looking and saying, you must know more than me. We
Right,
do we
there's this,
do
yeah,
generally think that, and there's this power imbalance where this person's come in and he said, yeah, you can stay here, and then I'm going to be your life coach, and then he starts making up the rules, and you don't have too many choices in some ways, do you? You can get quite brainwashed.
yeah. And he also was from Africa, so that's another cultural thing coming up. Many times use it in this statement. Oh, I will bring you to my relatives in Africa, then you will see how they really treat women. Which I'm so happy I left before that happened. Eh? Otherwise, you might not be able to see me today. But it's true. There's so much more things culturally. And as I was interviewing, somebody went through similar abuse, but from a chiropractor. It's interesting that it can happen from anyone, as you mentioned, who has more power. Especially it can be used in some professions like teaching, coaching. One of those where we go there seeking for help, emotional support,
Yeah.
and that already puts us in a vulnerable spot if we are asking the wrong person.
Oh, yeah. It's scary, actually, isn't it? Because there's so many people out there putting themselves up as experts, life coaches, whatever it is, and they're not good people. And we don't
Yeah.
know that, especially if they're
And
narcissists. We don't know that because they're coming across as charming. And it's not until you're sucked into the vortex that you really know what's going
yeah.
on. Yeah.
And here, just to add, actually, it was a good point you made because as I was working with the Barcelona police department, they make check on him, and of course he had no credential, no nothing. And back then I didn't even thought. I don't know if I thought about it, but of course I didn't do the check. So that's another red flag, not doing the background check. And I actually never got to meet neither of his family. Like it wasn't that he doesn't keep in touch, and now I know why.
Yeah.
That's another red flag if you are not able to see his relatives, or if you see the relatives and are toxic, like it feels weird, or they don't have friends. Like he didn't have any friend. Also interesting, be over 40 years old and have no close friends. And then talking about changing the world and all of that, which that's another thing which drew me to him, like the idea that he wanted to help change people, because that was me. Felt like that's that part of me who felt like, oh wow, we're going to do it together. He's going to help me. And we're going to change the world. So the hope of that little child of keeping the promises and doing it with a father figure, because as you said, it was 20 years old difference.
Yes. And so when you went into those other relationships with the narcissist, can you see the sort of similar patterns or the similar red flags that were running through those relationships that you just weren't recognizing?
Oh yeah, I feel that all of them were the same actually. And that's why the first episode of my expose series is called Groom, because it really shows not just my story, but how for others were the same signs, the same stages and behaviors. So until you know what it is, it's hard to do it by your own, because there are also good things. Like there are good times too when you're in those unhealthy relationships. That was another red flag, actually, the silent treatment. There was so much of that, and just him not talking, and with the next partners, them disappearing somehow when I didn't want to fulfill their asks. So they will just go to another victim or another person.
Yes. So you've been through these narcissistic relationships. What was your rock bottom moment, do you think, where you realized something needed to change?
There were so many, honestly. I think it all started with my realization of, as I found myself with a different person in the same kind of cycle, I felt, whoa, oh, interesting. This reminds me of just what I left and escape, but I'm here again. So those moments first, like feeling that it wasn't about changing the country or the partner, but it was about doing the hard work, what we are doing today, just diving deep into myself, and yes, and also releasing a lot of stuff from my ancestors, because I do believe part of those things were passed to me through the conditioning, which many of us can relate. So that was the realization, like I had to change, feeling that pain of I don't really want to go through it again. Like I want to have the opposite. That will be the another thing, like having the desire to experience good life, and then lots of therapy. That will be the third thing. Trying all of those which were available and I could afford. And then another rock bottoms would be just as you're going through physical, sexual, emotional abuse, you have to heal it differently. They're all connected. Sometimes when you heal one, the other part is affected. But still, I had to do a lot of sexual healing and diving into just connecting with my womb and releasing a lot of things around my chakras, my throat chakras. So it is a journey, and I'm still learning it all as I'm talking. I just had a year ago a premiere of my documentary, but I hired the wrong person. When I say wrong, I just didn't know what happens in romantic relationships can happen in business relationships. The idea of being gaslighted and groomed. So that's pretty much what happened. I was love bombed at the beginning with the project, how they want to help me, and I trusted too fast. I didn't make the research. I repeated the cycle. It was a friend of a friend who I thought it was my friend, but that was another thing I had to learn, to always make my own research, regardless wherever the person comes from. But to make the story short, it wasn't until the premiere where I was able to see the final documentary. Like the person was postponing it was 3 months of preparation, but every week it was some excuse, something was coming up. And being a people pleaser, I was like, okay, let's make it happen. And the closer it got, the harder it was for me to say no, like we're not doing it, because it almost feels like in that abusive cycle, you get so low and you tolerate so much shit that you just feels familiar. I think that's what it is. That's why I stayed there. And trusting the wrong people can slow the process. Or in my case, actually, it destroyed me in a way emotionally, because I really trusted that person, and I was like, I couldn't believe they showed on that premiere in person a footage I didn't agree for, where there was some sensitive informations. And can you believe it was something I asked them to delete, and they kept it. And so I felt I disappointed myself, and I've been calling people and apologizing. It was actually one person, and they never apologized, and they smiled to me after the event, and I knew I wasn't dealing with a healthy person. And another mistake I did, I paid them in advance for 12 months, so that I was financially suffering. Yeah, it cost me to the point that I had to learn those skills, and that's what I have been doing. When I disappeared for 12 months from social media, I've been editing in my room those episodes, because I realized that after doing few local screenings of the documentary for the people here in Oxnard, LA area, they all wanted to know why I'm doing this. We want to know your story. I put the shoes of courage, the hat of courage, and I shared with the episode 1 groomed how it all started. So that was another moment which really was awakening. May 2023, 21st of May, that was the premiere, when I was like, wow, I question everything. I question if I will be able to ever trust myself and others, because it was just one more time.
You mentioned before about getting control over those cycles of getting conscious, because we are in cycles of unconscious behavior, aren't we? And I know that you suffered with some strong suicidal ideation over the years. Do you have more of an understanding around why you were in those suicidal mindsets?
Yeah, those were the thoughts of my ancestors projected onto me because now I don't have them anymore as I release things. I don't have them anymore. They weren't mine because of course, I suffered, but it's more complex than maybe the ancestral. But I think that having those Auschwitz ancestors and people surviving in the war has impacted in a way my DNA. But yeah, the good thing is that I don't have anymore those suicide
Mm.
thoughts or feeling as a humans, we have two needs: the need to belong and not connect, belong and express. Yeah, those are the two. So I wanted to belong to my father, but he wasn't there. And I really felt like I had to have a father. I don't know, I just had that need. So I think, of course, I put him on the pedestal too, because who said having a father would be better? Nobody. It was just this kind of maybe the voice in my head, which I listened to and I believed. I was grieving a lot when I was 10, 11, 12. I just put music. I love Andrea Bocelli. I don't know if you know him.
Mhm.
And I would listen to him and just cry and think about my dad. And my mom would walk in and say, "Oh, you're listening again? Stop crying." And I was thinking, I just needed it. I just would like to think about my dad and cry. And I felt that was my need of just having him in my simple way, which I couldn't understand back then. But I made it happen somehow, because for that moment I could feel closer just having him included. But it felt like that I could be with him and experience what I thought would make me happy, which we don't know really what is going to happen after we die. And back then that felt familiar because it was with that kind of low energy of kind of victim. This happened against me and now I have to die to be with my father. It was all real part of it. But yes, expanding the consciousness and realizing I'm not my thoughts, it really helps with release part of those narratives which we take for real for different reasons.
And on the anniversary of your father's death in 2022, you said that something incredible happened. Can you share a little bit about that moment?
That's when I had the dream, when I heard his voice. It was in my bedroom and I couldn't fall asleep, which I have many moments like that, which I sometimes it's hard to talk about it because not everybody believes in that. So I'm very careful who I'm sharing it because I do realize we all are creating different way. So I think that's my superpower. But yeah, that night I just couldn't fall asleep and I just felt like somebody being there with me and just felt warm and it was inviting and it felt good. And I just felt to say that in Polish. I had this conversation in Polish and he just said, "I'm sorry, I couldn't be with you. And I never meant for you to feel that I abandoned you. And I'm sorry you felt this way. And I love you so much." Yeah.
Mm.
I love you so much, Anastasia. And that's actually, it just felt good. But also the name Anastasia, that was my father gave me that name because he liked that actress, Anastasia Kinski. So it was the voice in my heart. I didn't hear the voice outside, just to be clear. It was more the presence and the channeling was that I was open to hear that and receive that love. Yeah, and since that, it's something changed. It was like, I know it wasn't me. It wasn't me. And yeah, so yeah, thank you for reminding me that that felt good. Some of
Mm.
us might need that kind of experience, which we
Mm.
all can experience in therapy, actually. Yeah, I'm
But it,
grateful for that too.
maybe it's like a little bit of closure as well, just getting that connection, isn't it?
Yeah, and also in such a way that not everybody would be so brave to ask, like you are so brave. But I think we are souls, yeah. It's who we all are souls in this journey, and it takes a while to realize that this is just our body, and but this is bigger than we think.
Yeah. And so you've been in therapy, obviously, and is there anything in particular or anything else that has been really helpful for you to heal?
Yeah, the group support, like hearing others, thrivers, sharing, being real, authentic, taking the mask off and just being human. Oh, that was empowering, yeah. And I could see parts of me in them and Then when it got to the place of me sharing, I just went for it. I think that's what is the solution for undoing the trauma. The group therapy and hearing those stories, it gives you the permission to speak. Because if you never witness, like my situation, we'd never talked. Then I thought, okay, then I don't talk. Okay, I have to be rigid. But then you meet another beautiful people who are expanding, and you're like, oh, I like this. I can do this. Yeah, it feels good. I can share this. So I think the group support, and then just doing mistakes and being okay with doing mistakes. It's totally okay if my dream of expose doesn't go the way I wanted. It's totally okay. Or if I make a mistake with, it's just having plans, but letting it all flow, releasing the control over time alone, and just being, I'm privileged, blessed to live so close to the water. So whenever I feel, yeah, I need to release things, and I can actually, then just going close to the water and spending time in nature. I feel like connecting with the mother nature has been very powerful for my healing and transmuting part of the grief. Even I remember one day when I left that relationship in LA, and when I became homeless from one day to another, his idea was that I would give him money, doing extra money for making sex to someone, which I was totally no. And it didn't come until later, right? This kind of request. So right away, my luggage was packed. I was actually at work, and I was like, oh, wow, I guess I have no place to go now. I got the clothes delivered, and I do remember going to beach and just sitting. It was the same beach actually, so I'm getting emotional because I'm in front of that beach, and just feeling so low. Then I just felt the support of the earth under my feet as I was barefoot, and it felt that, yeah, it's to feel it all and cry, but I felt safe through that connection. I feel also the last thing would be the presence of God, or whatever you call universe, love, divine, just that something bigger than us, which watches us, which just is, and just a lot of grace in my life through it all, and now being able to receive it.
Yes, receive that love. And so after all these years of low self-worth, what do you celebrate about yourself now?
Everything, brushing my teeth, putting clothes, talking with you, drinking, being so genius to get a celery juice and all the water. You have no idea what's here. Flowers. I have my little place the way I want it. Just, yeah, I don't need big things. I don't need Oscars or whatever. I celebrate just saying no, confronting people, and changing my mind in the last second if that feels good. Yeah, that's what I tend to celebrate. Choosing myself and going to beach as much as I want, and sometimes not doing any work and just doing whatever it feels good.
Choosing yourself. That is good advice. And so, Anastasia, you've created an incredible series of videos, which includes 88 courageous and truly powerful stories of narcissistic abuse, along with the expertise of psychologists to help break the cycle of abuse. Sharing our stories is so powerful. Why did you start the expose movement and create the documentary?
Pretty much, I feel because so when I left on December 8th, 2018, I had the dream and actually a strong desire that I should move to LA. I had that dream to move to LA since 2016, but each time I had spoke, there was something coming up from that partner that no, you cannot live in LA. People are there to raping, guns, so it was a lot of terror. So I actually wouldn't apply for the visa, which back then I wanted to come here and act. That was different. Do acting workshops. Just come for a few months, just see what it is, experience. But when I left, it's like many of us, and I saw it not just in me, but we have this amazing courage. This amazing courage. It's a resilience too, but when we actually left, this took so much courage than anything else in my life, I think, to leave that first relationship, because that was actually the first time I ever walk away from a human. That was me walking away. So it was massive thing, massive success, which I celebrate to today. But the idea came to me. It was just subtle in my soul. But as I was working still in Barcelona, and I wasn't safe there because that person, even though I left, they kept coming to my workplace and I applied for restriction order. Unfortunately, I couldn't get it. Interesting, right? But many of the victims couldn't get the restriction order. I knew I wasn't safe in Barcelona in Spain, so I had to go. I could either go to Poland, which I didn't want. I felt like, no, not there. And the same time, I met at my workplace this family from Colorado. They actually were like, you have to come to our house before you go to LA. So I'm happy I did that. So I shared with them the dream. I didn't share everything about Expose, just the idea. I had this desire, and that's what I shared, of finding people who've been through what I've been through, and they are happy again. That was as simple. That was my desire. And slowly, when I arrived here and I got into another unhealthy relationships, which is funny because some of those partners helped me to open Facebook group and they connected me with some another survival. So there's good and bad, I guess. But yeah, I opened Facebook group and slowly there was more people who wanted to share. The reason why I created Expose was first because of that dream, but I think going back to my childhood, making the world better because my world was difficult, was hard. So I wanted to make the world better for others. I wanted to give others what I didn't get. And then the third thing would be just the opposite of what I experienced. So I wasn't allowed to share and speak. So I wanted others to speak and share. And that, I guess, the superhero in us who goes through difficulties creates some great things.
Every story on Expose is a woman who has been through narcissistic abuse and she's sharing what happened to her and how she's healing. That's what you're sharing with people.
Yeah, women and men, and also I forgot to mention transsexual. So we have, they, them, she, her, his. We have all the genders included. So there's 12 episodes, 15 actually, because I expanded it. But the main 12 episodes are around, like you mentioned, those are the women, but also the episode 11, women, men, and all the genders. But the episode 11 specifically, in that episode, I am interviewing individuals, two of them who have been diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder. So that's additional for some people to realize that they also have a story. And those two individuals, after years of therapy, and that's why they are sharing, which is really hard, honestly, to find somebody who wants to talk, because the whole idea of the narcissistic personality disorder is the lack of insight. So just wanted to add that. And then the episode 6, I'm actually interviewing the adults who are sharing their perspective of witnessing domestic violence in their home as a children, and how after years they are sharing that how it was for them and how that experience impacted their, pretty much like me, right? My story impacted their romantic relationships. And the episodes 7, 8, 9, they're about healing, like the mind, the body, how it heals different. And so I came with this idea of doing the release every second week. So actually this Thursday, I have the release for online for free for people. There will be a replay as well for the second episode, which is all about the red flags.
Yes, it sounds amazing. And I especially like the idea of hearing from the narcissists themselves, which would be fascinating listening. So, how can we access the documentary series and where can we find you?
So it is exposenetwork.com, and there's few pages. One of them is screenings, and when you go there, there is like information how we can join us live, and there is an option to also receive a replay by leaving your email, and everything else is also accessible on YouTube channel right now. So when you go to Expose the Network, or you just put on YouTube Expose the Network, that's the name of the channel, and there's already available the 90 minutes documentary. That was the first one, and the episode 1, which is Groom. And from Thursday, the episode 2 will be available. So I will be releasing the episodes one by one as we open it up, like officially online, to celebrate, because there's so much to celebrate. And also doing this online, the premieres, it gives a space for the 88 people to join the open panel and share how is their life now. So as you will see on the YouTube channel, there are replays of the 90 minutes documentary and then the Groomed. And after the screening, there is a great catch up of those individuals sharing, just like myself, how their life is now and how they are thriving. Amazing work.
Yes. Oh, it just sounds amazing what you've done. Those links can be found in the show notes. Please go and take a look at what Anastasia has created. It is an incredible resource for healing. Anastasia, this is a fantastic collection of stories. And I know that every listener of this podcast will resonate with the beautiful women who are sharing their stories in these videos. Thank you for sharing your story with us today. I don't think I'd really understood the depths of the impact that losing a parent could have on a child as young as 2 years of age, and the continuing impact that can be suffered for decades afterwards, leading to toxic relationships and so much heartache. Thank you for educating us through your story today and for your incredible honesty and vulnerability.
It was my pleasure. I hope it helps. That's why I'm here to make the change, but also to give the voice for the parts of me who couldn't speak up back then. It's emotional for me too when you read all of that, but I think that it's necessary to highlight that we can always change the meaning to any story we gave to the past, and it can be the opposite meaning than the one we are creating, and that can really change the way we see ourselves and everything around, because my story shows the negative of it, but also the positive, because as I changed that narrative after I had this dream in 2020, this dream experience with my father. Yeah, I knew that it was just my mind making tricks.
Yes.
So we can end suffering ourselves too. But
True.
we are not alone. We are not alone. So there is a support group. And also, I would love to invite you to my Facebook group. It's a free tool as well. It's on the website. There's like a support network and there's like a link. If you can find it, there's an email. You can email me and I will send you all the tools to make sure you get what you needed.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.